HTML5 Web Testing, kind of web development, kind of the next generation of testing web applications is kind of what we're here to talk about. So traditionally, testing, performance testing, integration testing, all these things have been very, very server-centric, right? How's my server going to scale to thousands, millions, hundreds, of customers? Where with, HTML5, Web 2.0 even, been quite a shift, right? Into what now things like Sprout Core talk about browser-based applications, right? So trying to move that logic, trying to move what you're doing into the browser. So there's a whole area of testing and things that need to be done, need to be repeatable, need to be automated. When you write that code, when you do the work, how is it going to run in Safari, IE 678, Firefox 3, how's it going to do on Service Pack 3? How's it going to run on Linux with all these different platforms, variations, service packs? How are you going to test and run your application on that? And do that without having to do the work to do that for all those platforms. So I'll go over some tools, techniques, ways that I've been doing that in my work. So I've been very interested in that lately, and so that's why I kind of threw together a slide deck and do a few talks. About me, wrote a book, Web 2.0 Fundamentals. I'm a Java champion, sort of like a, Innovator Lifetime Achievement Award for Java. So that's really my area, is Java and Java web development. It's not in testing, it's not in QA, it's not really in that area. Run 3 user groups, Silicon Valley web developer, whoops, misspelled web, Java user group, the Google Technology user group, and the JavaScript meetup. Principal architect, and I lead the JavaScript team in architecture at E-Trade. Also do a messaging team, AMQP, JMS, that kind of stuff, and also run the offshore team there as well. Master's and bachelor's in computer science, and I've taught 7 college courses, College of San Mateo. So, and then the final kind of note there is, I'm no testing expert, that's not my gig. I'm a Java guy, but kind of as I have a team of people working for me is something that I thought I could give to them kind of as a gift to my team to help them, right? To give them the ability, confidence in what they're doing, and that's really where all this comes about. So it's really driven from a developer focus rather than kind of a QA focus. So one thing I want to do real quick is poll and see how many of you are kind of QA type people. So I know we have a handful. And then the rest of you are web developers. Cool. That's good. It's a good fit for me. So you're all curious to kind of get a little bit more knowledge, understanding. So it's good. So outline, we'll talk about the evolution of the web, just one slide. Some testing background, talk about automation, why you need these things automated. Monkey testing is not acceptable. Look at the evolution of how we got here, kind of old school, kind of browser-based things you may be familiar with, kind of their limitations, moving into what most people are doing today with Selenium. And then finally looking at kind of what I'm here to talk about, or at least to somewhat recommend as one option, is something called TestSwarm, and how you can integrate TestSwarm into your environment, continuous integration, things like that. So evolution of the web, right? You guys are all familiar with this. HTML, HTML2, HTML4. Things get interesting here in this kind of area where we start moving into CSS rather than kind of table-based layouts, moving toward Ajax, 2005. And it's kind of from this point forward where we started building kind of browser-based applications. And what's unique about those is, without that refreshing of a page, things have to really work. They have to work in all browsers, all situations. It is kind of unique where you don't have a page reload out there to save you, right? People don't, want that Web 1.0 kind of experience anymore. And with HTML5 kind of becoming more popular, being adopted, it's quite a bit different. So here in the red, 2002 to 2009, that's where kind of this evolution of a change from server-side kind of dumb client to now is basically, scaling to the cloud kind of has a whole different meaning of, the Sprout Core framework talks about scaling to the cloud being the browser the cloud. So you can scale all your logic to all the users of your website. So why should developers do automated testing, right? This stuff is very, very bleeding edge. A lot of these open source frameworks that we're using, they're not really up to par. They're not always tested so well. There's all kinds of browsers out there. Another thing is, every time as a developer that you're checking in code, you're taking a huge risk, right? Putting that out there. So every time I check in a piece of code that I know is going to go into production, I'd like to be able to test that, thoroughly. So as I build my site bigger and bigger and bigger, I know at where I work at E-Trade Financial, we've got some sort of crazy number, like 3,000 different web pages, 3,500 web pages. So, I work on the core infrastructure team that develops frameworks. A lot of these frameworks will touch all 3,000 of those pages. So I can't test that, right? So another really interesting thing about why developers, rather than QA, developers should do automated testing, is the earlier you find and detect bugs, the less the cost is. Either money, embarrassment, time. As things move further and further down that chain, you end up investing a lot of money in getting those fixed. So early detection is very key, and that's why, as I work with my team, I tell them just consider that QA doesn't exist, right? You're your own QA. Every feature you develop, it's not delivered and completed until there's a test written that verifies it. So what does that give you? It lets you really speed up your development. You can code much faster with confidence because you know you have a huge regression suite behind you. And, most importantly, you get the project done, you can move on and hand that off to someone and do some innovation elsewhere. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want to be on the same project for 8 years, right? Because I'm the only one who owns that and nobody else is afraid to touch that piece of shit that I wrote, right? So the code may be of varying quality, but at least they can make changes with confidence, right? So how many of you do any sorts of testing? Anyone? Automated testing? Very few, right? Maybe half the room or so. You're missing out. Automated testing is just, something that it's amazing what it does for you, and really has, for me, changed my whole career. I've been doing that kind of test-driven development for many years. Really, really nice. So here's kind of testing background, kind of manual testing or monkey testing, right? Found this on, Picasso or something. Interesting. But kind of want to look at manual testing versus automated testing, and unit testing versus integration testing, kind of what the differences are, what you gain. And one of the interesting quotes Google has, and they actually got rid of this but one of their original things that they used to say is life is too short for manual testing. So life is way too short for monkey testing. I don't want to be a monkey. You don't want to be a monkey, right? So let's not do that, right? Anyway, manual versus automated testing, kind of green versus red, good, bad. Manual testing, it is nice because it catches visual bugs. So that was one of the questions he had to me was, how can you deal with these, visual things? You're going to have to do that manually, some sort of smoke test, whatever, to kind of verify things visually. There's no real great solutions for that. It's very, very time consuming. It's very expensive, and people don't do it, right? Hell, I don't do it either. I don't want to do it, right? I don't want to be a monkey. So automated testing, it's less expensive. I can almost write an automated test as fast as I can go through and I think I can write an automated test at the same rate as I can actually do it manually. In almost, maybe a 2x, 3x fold, right? Maybe, but you've done one, you've done a few. They kind of they all look pretty similar. So that cost of writing it once may be double than doing it manually, but wow, you have got that for the next however long the code lives, right? Every time you do a release, anything, and the boss says, hey, can you verify this? Yeah, give me 5 minutes, right? Let me click the button, walk away, go have a break, come back, and I'll let you know what works and what doesn't. So what's nice about automated testing is it can become part of your process, part of your release process, something that's never skipped. But the downside, it doesn't catch visual problems. So it's not a kind of catch-all kind of a solution. So test automation, right? So there's different ways of doing that, right? So you can do automation kind of build time, Maven, Ant, Gradle, if you're in a kind of a Java world like me, have your build tool do it. It's really great because it catches bugs very, very early, but I think it's annoying as hell, right? I don't like that. It's way too frequent. A lot of times I know my code is broken and I'm just trying to kind of get through. It'll encourage you to go out and comment out test cases and screw up your whole test environment. Waste a lot of time. This is actually like the default behavior for Maven is to run all your tests. So I don't really like that, right? Especially if you have integration test in there. I don't really like it. You end up then, I know at eTrade, we have actually, for doing our roles, we've actually commented out and removed all testing in Java because of this problem. So the next way you can kind of look at is SVN hooks. So you can kind of, every time somebody checks in code, have it fire off kind of your testing, which is kind of a cool solution, a little bit better, catches bugs before you share them with others, right? It's at a point at least you think the code is stable, hopefully, especially with tools like Git where you're not kind of pushing that forward. But, there's no ways to wait for other check-ins. So what if you have 3 different check-ins you need to do, but you want to do them on different revisions? Like as soon as you do the first one, all these tests are running and it's not going to work. And it may run too frequently still, same kind of problem. So what I like is kind of a continuous integration kind of approach. Product and Cruise Control, Anthill Pro are really, really nice tools. So so one of the things that it does, same idea, catching bugs early. You can put a quiet period, so you can kind of tell it, wait 5 minutes after a check-in, no check-ins, and then go ahead and kick off your testing. And you can email the managers. You can email only those who have checked in code since the last success. You can do all these things. And then it's kind of a limited frequency as well, so that you can say at most do this once an hour or whatever whatever the kind of maximum frequency you want that to happen. So how many of you are familiar with tools, Hudson, these kind of tools, right? Cool. Good. So unit versus integration tests, and I will tell you, like, this is an extremely simplified view. I mean, this is not, don't cross, don't use this as answer in a Google interview or something. But basically, I look at testing just from these two perspectives. Unit testing is very, very fast. That's something that you could run with every, with every build or whatever if you wanted. It has absolutely no configuration, no dependencies, runs offline. So you can be on an airplane, disconnected from everything, including the internet, and still run the unit test. And they should complete, within, a half a second or less. Integration test is more testing how do your components kind of integrate together. And often there's it can be very, very time consuming, doing multi-threaded type things, many dependencies, requiring databases, things like that. So my personal opinion is traditional kind of server-side testing, you're going to get the most gain from unit test, right? Significant amount of logic, that's where you're really gaining. More browser kind of direction, HTML5. I'm actually becoming a bigger fan of integration testing for that. So I tend to test my back end more unit test. I think that's where you get kind of 80% of the value. I think with web stuff, because of the fact of how does it run differently on every browser, right? That's what's unique, because it's not one platform, it works. And you can run that unit test and just test a single piece of code. But, you know, how does the DOM render, all these things, what's the timing in different browsers? So for me, at least my opinion is integration testing is where we, you know, my team, we devote a lot of our time on kind of the JavaScript side of things. So old school testing, right? So we're going to kind of look into how we got to where we are today, moving forward, but it's, you know, it's just not so fun. So some of the tools that were out there, JSUnit, which was just a port of JUnit to JavaScript. Rhino engine, you guys are probably familiar with, which lets you run JavaScript inside of Java. So it's kind of almost like a browser. I know Mozilla did it. It's kind of a browser simulator. So you can do your test kind of offline in an automated fashion. There's another tool, HTTPUnit, which is built on top of Rhino. And then one of my favorites that I always enjoyed was something, qUnit Web Test, which allowed you, was built on top of HTTPUnit, but let you kind of write your test in XML. And it was built all the way back on top of Rhino. So I'll show you what that kind of looked like, right? So this was what I love to do. I don't know, 4 years ago or something like that. So write a various XML where I go to a URL, google.com. I verify that the title's Google, that I've loaded that. I set the Q, right, that's their input, into web test. I click the I'm feeling lucky button, and then I verify that that took me to the qUnit website because it has the title of qUnit Web Test, right? So, you know, this was great. There's no, how long did anything take? I don't know, right? Can I repeat things? Can I store things in variable? I have no kind of it's like trying to code in XML. It's very, very limiting in what you do. They do have some groovy extensions, but this is how I did it, right? Old school, I loved it, right? Today, you're not going to be too happy with this, right? So modern testing, you want kind of more kind of robot direction driven kind of doing things. Selenium. So how many of you guys have used Selenium? So what Selenium is it starts with kind of a kind of monkey testing recorder in Firefox. So you turn on the recorder, you click around, do the various things that you do, and then you can right click on things because it's a plugin and say verify text or, you know, things like this, so that you kind of build up this test case, and that kind of comes out in HTML, and then that test case can be converted into various languages, right? Java, C#, Perl, you know, Python, Ruby, whatever. So once you get into the language of your choice, then, you know, your HTML kind of converts over to Java. Then you can, you know, looping and variables, and, you know, you can create little modules out of it. And this is really, I would say, you know, a large majority of the testing that's done today from QA departments is all driven off of Selenium. And then there's something called Selenium RC, which lets you kind of automate firing off a browser from the server and running in a handful of browsers. So that's Selenium. And here's a sample script, very similar to what I just kind of did, but this is done through recording. So all you have to do is open up the web page, go to google.com, you'll type in the Q hello world, and then wait for a Wikipedia to be in the results and assert that it has, you know, some sort of a value there about hello world, right? So that's kind of Selenium. So like I said, you can take this and generate Java. At my work, they do this in Ruby, and they built a little framework on top of that. A lot of the issues is it's all XPath driven, but it's driven from the top of the page down. So if you right-click on an input field, it starts at HTML body. You know, is it in some div? It'll say the 4th div of the page, and you'll get we often get XPath that's this long that's extremely brittle. So the second you change your website, you broke hundreds of tests. So let's look at kind of the next generation, where I want to be, or where I am today, and hopefully you guys will get to, and where the industry kind of momentum is going towards is kind of, I don't know, the thing I wrote here is use the biggest cloud, which would be crowd, right? What is the biggest, use crowdsourcing. Use all the people of the internet. Use that entire network to do your testing, right? So why do we need these newer tools kind of moving forward? Because there's a lot of problems with Selenium. And Selenium is hugely popular and has been for many, many years. My whole team is JavaScript. They don't know any of those other languages out there, but I can't write Selenium in JavaScript. Write it in Java, Ruby, C#, you name it, but not a single person on my team has any of these skill sets. So that's just a huge barrier to me, right? As you're developing a web application, you should also be developing tests for that, and you have to go out and learn another language. That means probably another tool set, another IDE possibly. To me, that doesn't really work so well, right? That's not the right solution. It requires the server with the Selenium RC installed. So the only thing that can launch a browser is your Selenium RC server. So how many browsers can a server launch? A handful. How many IEs can you launch? You can only have one version of IE on a server, first of all. So that means you're going to have a dedicated server with a full installation of Selenium RC for all this. So that's a huge barrier for me. Maybe you can maintain a handful of these, but then you're gonna have to keep that updated it's a huge hassle. Unit testing with Selenium is almost like impossible. So Selenium is completely black box. So it's a click and recorder. So you're clicking on the web page. How do I inspect JavaScript variables? How do I call JavaScript functions? How do I mock things out? How do I say, well, instead of giving me whatever the service gave me, what's going to happen if the service had returned this data? Edge conditions that I can't get in my database. At E-Trade, I do a lot of work with qUnit, which is reverse Ajax, pushing, and they always ask me, well, what if a customer has 3,000 symbols in their portfolio? How is this going to behave? Selenium doesn't really help you in any way, shape, or form kind of do that. There's a lot of problems there. That's what everybody's using. This is a little bit of innovation kind of moving forward. TestSwarm we'll talk about. So before I talk about TestSwarm, I want to kind of step back and talk about qUnit. And that's a really nice testing tool for jQuery. So how many of you guys are doing jQuery? So that's like maybe 85%, 90% of the crowd here, right? So I hosted or moderated a panel on HTML5 at Google, I don't know, 6 months ago, or I don't even remember when it was. Sasha was there, right? 6 months ago? Yeah. So I had kind of, an array of the experts of HTML5 on the panel. And what I found was it was kind of like the next kind of Kleenex analogy, where instead of saying tissue, everybody says Kleenex. Well, when they would want to refer to JavaScript, they would say, go out and write a little jQuery. So jQuery is almost like a replacement for JavaScript, in my opinion, right? That's what I see in the various, groups that I run in, and obviously is well represented here. Anyone doing HTML5, whatever is not doing, MooTools, Dojo, what are all the other prototype scriptaculous. I did a lot of that back in the day. But jQuery is pretty much kind of the de facto standard. So how many are familiar with qUnit? Wow, so we went from 85 to 5. Or maybe 2 people, right? So it's less than that. So anyway, you should go out and learn qUnit. So when John Resig kind of went out and did his whole jQuery stuff, Johnny said, you know, JSUnit, all these other tools, they're not kind of up to speed for what he wants. So he wrote qUnit to help him write jQuery. So that's why, you know, jQuery seems to work very well. You don't find a lot of kind of, at least trivial bugs anyway in jQuery. Some edge conditions here and there, but in general, the thing tends to work. It doesn't regress. They take testing very, very seriously. So, you know, this is a great tool. I'll give you a quick demo. So that's the idea of, I ran kind of 4 different modules here. So I can open, the first module is some basic test, and it had 2 tests or 2 assertions within it, and they were both successful, and the total of 2, and 2 out of 2 were successful, 0 failures. So you can open that up and see kind of what was there, the details. You can open up this one, and you can see in the 4th module there was a failure, and at the bottom it kind of sums it up that 5 of the 6 tests passed, and there was 1 failure, right? So here's kind of a qUnit kind of sample code. So you define a test. This is a basic test. You guys are familiar with, you wrap this in like a document ready if you want the test to fire off. But here it does a test, does an OK. You know, the things that you can use are equals and OK. And then it has another thing called an asynchronous test. There's a lot of things you don't know when they're going to finish. You're going to have to do set timeouts, things like that. So it runs one test and doesn't proceed to the next until you call, I don't, finished or done or something. I'll show you in a minute maybe. But this is kind of the idea, right? It's pretty simple. Any questions on this? It's very, very simple kind of idea of what you can do with that. So what are some of the limitations? Is it requires a custom HTML page to run the test, right? So here you saw I put the test in line, test in another file. You can include tests from your app. So when you're doing unit testing, that's very, very easy. You can create an HTML file that includes your framework code, that you've written, and then includes the test, and you'll run those tests against it. No big deal. But what if you want to do more integration tests, right? It's not really possible. So I'll show you how I kind of solve that problem by embedding qUnit in my application and putting qUnit right on my application. The other thing about it is it doesn't live through page loads, right? It's written in JavaScript. It runs in JavaScript. So if your page reloads, you go to a different page, it's, you've lost all your, you give new memory, it's a new stack, it's a new qUnit. So I did another, I actually didn't write it, but one of the guys that worked for me, I had him write it, that loads various URLs in iframes and is able to aggregate qUnit test, and we will open source that very, very soon. Just finished, I think yesterday, so you get to see something very, very, but that'll be open sourced through Append2. Like, it will have no tie to me or E-Trade Financial, but that'll be out there. So Jonathan Sharp, who's probably speaking on the 9th, you'll probably see his name on it. So, because he does a lot of work for me. So here's how, I go and integrate. So this is, I just try to, hey, now I'm doing jQuery stuff, whatever. The, Append2 guys are making me some certified jQuery trainer. I should write my website in jQuery. Because previously as a Java person, I wanted to try out GWT and went out and tried to force Java into the browser and write my site in GWT. So how many of you are familiar with GWT? Yeah. Gabriel has the 2 thumbs down. Anyone have positive experiences with GWT? Negative experiences, at least? It was the easiest JavaScript I've ever written in my life. in that I had a full IDE. It felt very, very comfortable for me, but I had a lot of confusion about when am I on the server, when am I on the client. Because you have Java either time, and it's like the same files, and a lot of times it was just very, very hard for me to get over that hurdle. And then once you had to go into your own JavaScript, I found it very, very difficult. Like I have this whole heavyweight framework of qUnit, but now I'm trying to pull in jQuery or something. It wasn't that exciting kind of for me. So here is kind of a localhost version of my site running with the same thing, where what I've done is if a qUnit variable is in the query string, it runs this particular test. So here you'll see as I refresh, the site loads, the qUnit's at the top, boom, and then it executed. So what it did, it clicked on this tab, did some assertions, clicked on the home page tab, and did some assertions. A very, very, very simple test because I just wrote this last night at like midnight. So I can show you kind of the test. Let's make this full screen. Oh my goodness. Okay. So here I've wrapped it into closure so that I can namespace the queue. And then here I'm passing in this repeat test from the command line. And the reason I'm doing that is I want to know what happens over time if I repeat this test 50 times, right? What if I click and load that tab 50 times? What if I do it 100 times? And I want to look at the timing from the first time I did it to the last time I did it, and how does that trend? So in the framework I'm building for eTrade, we're doing something very similar to like an iGoogle type of idea, widgets, whatever. And what I found is adding a widget to a page, every time I would add a widget, it would be 100 milliseconds slower than the time before. So I'd add it, remove it, add it, remove it, add it, remove it. After you do that 30 times, you're taking 3.5 seconds just to add a widget, right? That's not acceptable. So found some major memory leaks. So one thing I'll show you here, what I've done is finding memory leaks through repetition. Because what do memory leaks do? They make your browser run slower. So here we'll look at the test, at what we've done. So we have an asynchronous test here that basically the first thing I do is I click the third tab, right, 0 indexed. I click that, and then I wait for, so I have a selector here. I'm looking for the description of rock climbing. It says like, hey, I like to climb different places. Then what I've done is I wrote a selector here that is waiting for something to become available. So it's a custom plugin written by Jonathan, actually. He wrote this because that's what I said was, hey, I want to integration test my page. How can I see when something becomes rendered in the DOM? And so he wrote this plugin called qUnit when available, which is actually later in my slides, but we'll talk about it now. And what it does is, I had him extend it kind of for me. He wrote just a when available. And I said, well, when available is great, but we got to do all these error messages, very boilerplate code. Wrap that plugin in another plugin called qUnit when available that says, after 5 seconds, if this selector is still empty, then fail. And then if it fails, use the kind of description of I was looking for climbing description. If it succeeds, you know, and basically I found that has rendered to the DOM, then basically do whatever, you know, your next step is. If you need to fill out a form, if you need to click things. So I'm just saying start, which finishes the test, right? So what this other number is, I have two kind of modes. One I call JS profiling, and the other is, you know, just a random test. So the difference is, if I have my QA department run this at 3 in the morning, I don't want to call. Like, if that damn thing renders within 5 seconds, it's a pass. But if I'm doing profiling, I look at this repetition, I kind of expect, like clicking a tab, it better be there within 600 milliseconds, right? And so what I tied that into is a variable repeat test. So what I can do is if I say repeat test equals 20, it'll run this test 20 times, or it'll repeat some steps of it. So that's what you see in the loop here, this count. It passes in at the bottom here. So if you're familiar with jQuery, this like kind of extends the object, this run count, which comes out of repeat test. So I can show you that right here. If I put repeat test equals 3. So here you see 0 or 1 and 2 with the 0 in front of it. You'll see a 0, 1, 2 in front of it. Now when I do a repeat test, right? So now it did the same thing. It did the climbing home, climbing home, climbing home. Repeated 3 times. And the beauty of this is I can open this up and see that the climbing tab loaded in 56 milliseconds the first time, the second time 73 milliseconds, the third time 69 milliseconds. So I don't have any, I mean, this is all static. It's like it's something I wrote like after midnight this week. So there's no logic in here. But when I do this on our commercial website, it can be very interesting results. The other thing I talked about, the problem of you know, what if I need to refresh pages? What if I need to do one URL then another? And where this became an issue for us was login. So we're doing a new kind of framework, but it's only going to be half the site, and there is no login capability. So I need my automated testing to go to the old site and log in, keep that cookie, and then go to the new area and continue to run testing. So how do we do that? With an iframe and then run the test, the qUnit test, in an iframe. So the first URL will be the old site, give me some cookies. The next URL, run the actual test. So I don't know what this other stuff says, but that's what it does. So let me give you a quick kind of run of that. So here it is. So what you'll see at the top, this is an aggregated thing where I've run all of my tests. So I can, let me actually change this, and I'm pretty sure climbing, comma, links test, comma, the IT section. So that'll run 3 tests. So you'll see 3 tests, it'll be empty. It'll run the first test here. When it's finished, it'll pull it up here. It'll run the second test down here. When it's finished, it'll pull the aggregation here. So it's like a qUnit test of individual unit tests. But we only have one frame for running the test. We blow all the others away. But the advantage of this is say you did some sort of a huge repetition load test, your site is still available right here. So you can still go into Firebug. You can still play with it. You can still see what's the real performance when you click on it. You can inspect. You know, we have something of active widgets. It tells us what we think are active widgets. We have event registration. We can look at all that. And so if I clear all my widgets away, I should see nothing in those. But I obviously don't. So that's kind of the idea here. So whoops, I refreshed. So sorry, we didn't get the 3. We're going to get all the tests here. But the climbing test, the home test, the link test, the family, you know, just runs through and does you know, simple, just click and verify that something is present. So there you see that. And I'll show you what the configuration for that looks like. Here's a config. So I define test suites, which are an array of tests. So I define something called all, which is run climbing, then home, then linked, and family and IT. That's what you just saw. Or we have individual tests. For the climbing test, go to this URL. For the home test, go to this, you know. So it's very, very simple. You can pass in query string parameters. You can extend this to do a post instead of a get. You can have it go to a URL that's not a qUnit test. You know, and for qUnit, what it does is, you know, JavaScript's a dynamic language. What it does is it goes into qUnit itself, replaces some of the functionality, passes that to the parent frame so that we can do the aggregation. So you can use out-of-the-box qUnit. When qUnit done is called, we pass that kind of up. So it's kind of a neat little thing, but I can't take credit for this, but I had a lot of good people helping me kind of, I don't have time. I'm in meetings all day, wasting my life. So here's the two plugins. So Jonathan wrote wentavailable, which is open source, GitHub, Append2. So Append2 is the commercial company behind jQuery. And then I said, wentavailable is cool. Like, I want to wait for some selector, but sometimes I want to wait for something to turn green, or I want to wait for something to happen, some closure. So I had a guy work for me, said, take the wentavailable, but let's do whenTrue. So you can pass in any function you want, and when that function says it's done, and it works through polling. It polls every 15 seconds. So the selector version that Jonathan wrote, every 15 seconds it runs that selector. If the selector is empty, then it keeps polling. Once it gets the data, it continues. whenTrue is just, it runs whatever closure that you want, and you're going to return. So there is the whenavailable at the top. So you can see how it sets timeout. It's a regular jQuery plugin, right? $function, passing in. And then here's the wrapper for qUnit right there. So I actually wrote all the messaging was all screwed up when Jonathan kind of delivered it. So I rewrote it. He had like one line, but it just wasn't cool. So I got like this whole huge block of crap in there. So there you see the whenavailable. So qUnit whenavailable calls whenavailable in that, kind of same regards, right? And it's passed in. Basically, was it a hard timeout or a soft timeout? That is very, very simple, right? And then I have various things. Is if I'm profiling, then what kind of messaging do I want to give? So I give warnings if you're greater than like the 600 milliseconds, but you said you don't care about that. So that's where I say a particular warning. And then the whenTrue, I've actually never looked at this, but Joe finished this a couple days ago, and that's the idea there. TestSwarm. So what is TestSwarm? So TestSwarm, this is really, really cool stuff. So it is, similar to like a Selenium and these other tools, but what it does is it allows for any browser on your network to help with testing. So all you have to do is go to a URL. Now I'm part of the TestSwarm, right? So here you see you have all these browsers that go to a URL from your TestSwarm. Firefox 3, 3.5, Opera, IE, several versions of IE on Mac, whatever it is. And then I can send a test suite that I'd like to be run to the TestSwarm. It will send it to all these browsers, run it on all these browsers, and then send the results back to me. So, this amazing tool. So who wrote it? John Resig wrote it, creator of jQuery. So it's very well integrated with qUnit. John Resig created that. So that's where we kind of come that directions. And John works for Mozilla Labs. So it's done as a Mozilla Labs project. So it's really, really cool. So does this sound like, just as I explained it, does this sound something kind of interesting? So you write a qUnit test once. That is your overhead. Configure a little server, may take you an hour. And then next thing you know, you're empowered to test your app on every single platform and browser you can get your hands on. So this is the idea of TestSwarm. So those of you who have your laptops or whatever, feel free. Hopefully the network will let you join my TestSwarm here that I have. Whoops, I want to, and I'll give you kind of a quick little demo of that. Exit full screen. So TestSwarm. So if you go to this URL right here, and you hit start running tests, then you'll type in your name or type whatever you want. You type hello. I can't even see it. It's somewhere in the database. It won't show funny things to other people. So sorry. It would have been a lot funner if we were able to do that. But type something, hit submit, and then what we'll see is we'll start seeing 1, 2, 3, because you probably have lots of Firefox. Chrome, if you can get your Android browser on this wireless network, we can run my websites thing on your Android device. So anything that you can get on this network, your laptop, if you have, you know, anything, you can run those tests. So here I'll start running the test here, and what it does, it pulls up an iframe and just ran the test and sends the results back to the server. So I'll give so you see them running over and over again, and it would run my test out there. So we'll go into Hudson, continuous integration. Let me configure my test real quick. So this is another tool that I wrote that's basically this is a plugin for Hudson that lets me kick off TestSwarm jobs. So I actually offshored this to my offshore team. I've got 4 people offshore, and I had one of them write this over the last 3 weeks. So I can do build now. Did I click it? Yes, I did. Console output. I'll tell you about this in a second. But here it is. The test that I ran is running in Chrome. So those 2 tests have run. It'll run in other, now it went up to the links, and it'll go up to the climbing here. And then it kind of shows, oh, somebody's running in Safari. That's kind of the idea. And so these are the tests that it ran, right, as I configured to kick that off. And if you want to rerun the test, you can click there, and it will hopefully rerun the test. Whoa, what happened? I just ran this. Maybe I got a new... There we go, localhost. You know what? My IP address changed. So that's probably from an earlier link, and I got off the wireless network when I had pizza. Sorry. So I don't want to waste a bunch of your time and refigure that. But anyway, you see how it works. Anyway, that's what it would have ran, and then eventually these will time out and turn black, and I can actually click and go to that page and see what the result was. So let's go back to 11. So here I can see if I click on this, this is actually a static content. I wasn't online, so I couldn't get any of my images. That's actually a static version, binary version in the database. So you see exactly how it ran on that browser, like the HTML that was in that browser. So, and it expands open the tab, you know, so you can see. So here you see this one took 21 milliseconds to load, and that took 40 milliseconds to load. So to set up TestSwarm, I use something called Bitnami. Any of you guys familiar with Bitnami? It is amazing if you're like a Linux, whatever. So what it does is it gives you several applications with a one-click install. So I wanted a lamp stack. So I went and got the Bitnami version of a lamp stack. And it gives me a one-click install. You know, there's a Linux version, a Mac version, and a Windows version. And I go get that. You know, here I put it on my Mac. At work I put it on Linux. One-click install. It asks me 2 questions. That's it. And does 100% of the installation of my home directory. Nothing runs as root. Nothing requires root ownership. So how do you update? You create another directory and put the next one in. It is so cool. So I can't, like, Bitnami is amazing. It has Drupal, it has LAMP, it has Redmine, it has Track, it has a ton of amazing tools. So what TestSwarm requires to run is a PHP LAMP stack, and then you have to set up a virtual host for /TestSwarm, or / I did it for root. And that's it. So you just have to go in and put it in, and then add some, there's a SQL file that creates all the tables, put that in. So I can probably do an installation in 20 minutes now, you know, and that's like downloading it and everything. So it's that easy. Really great tool. So here is the testswarm.com, which somebody told me was down today, which is almost always down. But imagine if you wrote a test and you were able to test it in Chrome 1, 2, and 3 on XP, 1, 2, and 3 on Vista, 2 and 3 on Windows, because, you know, 7, because that's the only ones available. You know, all these different platforms, Linux on Conqueror, with all you need to do is, if you have these, put them there. So what I've done, I walk around, I see a machine that's unplugged. I say, can I have that? Yeah, shit, get this out of here. Sure, great. I need the room in my cube, right? So I got a big stack of shit in my cube, basically. And what I do is I go into the startup menu on Windows, and I install Chrome, Safari, Firefox, and IE, obviously. And then I go in and I set the home page to be the testing URL. So all I have to do is, and then put all those links to them in the startup menu. So all I have to do is log in, and it puts 5 browsers on the TestSwarm. So then I can get IE6, IE7, IE8, different service packs, Chrome, various versions, and I can run 3 or 4 or 5 browsers of different flavors, at least, on one machine. Yeah, question?
Yeah, have you done anything with virtual machines, like where you're just basically creating a student farm?
So that's what I want to go to. So we have a Linux virtualization, but my problem, so I'll tell you a story. The first time I got TestSwarm to work, we had a significant amount of qUnit written, right? So the first time I got it to work, if you'll remember, you have the various browsers and what the performance kind of is. And what I saw is Firefox 3.6 was 100% green. IE6, 7, and 8 had red all over it. Chrome was, half and half. Safari was half and half. What does that tell me? My development team writes good shit, tests well. They want to do good work. They've been running everything is green in Firefox 3.6. In Firefox 3.1, it's not. So I actually gave a presentation to the CTO of E-Trade on this, and we got it to run like 3 days before he came out. And I showed him the test from 3 days before, the first time I got it to run, job number 1. And then I showed him job number 15 that was 100% green. So in 3 days, my developers were able to fix all the bugs in all the browsers, because they're leveraging jQuery, which takes care of 90% of it. But then once you find those edge cases, that's the thing. So the kinds of things, just so you know, that we found were problems is we're writing a framework. So one of the things that we write is something that lets you make an AJAX call to return a style sheet, and then have a callback when that style sheet is loaded. So that works in like 90% of the browsers, but then in a small edge case of them, that callback doesn't fire. So if you dynamically want to add a widget and with it comes a style sheet, I need to know when the style sheet is loaded. So with the code we originally had, the widget would never load because we'd never get a callback telling us that the style sheet had loaded in Firefox 3.1. Also in IE7. IE7 is a pretty large part of your user base. So, I mean, it's not the hello world, I click the button, those are the kind of things that are broke. It's, and as a framework team, we're writing a lot of these kind of utilities to make the lives of the developers who use our framework easier. So Hudson, we're almost done here. So what is Hudson? It lets you schedule kind of builds in an automated fashion. I can say run this once an hour. I can also integrate with my SCM. So I can say every time somebody checks in code, run this. I can say if it fails, whoever's checked in code, email them. I can have it do both. So we run our roll on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I can say on Tuesday and Thursday morning, run this test, run the build, whatever it is. So I went ahead and I said, wow, I need that for TestSwarm. So like I said, I had the offshore team kind of write a plugin for Hudson. So if you haven't used Hudson, how many of you guys have used Hudson? Is it the easiest tool in the world to use, right? So previously I've used cruise control. Any cruise control users? Doesn't it suck, right? It's like XML. Yeah, it's like XML hell all over the place too. All configuration is done through XML. So here's Hudson. I can create a new job, and then here I'll just show you my job that I made. I can configure that job, and if I want to disable it, not to run anymore, I just click that button. It disables it, but it keeps everything ready. So what are some advanced options? Do I want a quiet period? So I want to wait 5 minutes after a check-in. If it fails, do I want to retry? Right? And things about upstream projects, if this one fails, I can have dependencies between them. So at work, I have one that builds things, and I have another that tests things. And so my tests will run on any environment, but it's very complicated to build, the way they do it. So I won't go into all that. So for source code, I can go, hey, go to Subversion, and I want to do an update, or do I want to do a full checkout? And then to get my source code, and then I can pull SCM to do any of the like cron tab styled things. So here will be every 5 minutes past the hour, right? You guys know cron tab? It's kind of, but you can do add hourly. So what it'll do is what I typically do is this right here, started by 15. So every 15 minutes, I want it to pull SCM, see if anybody's checked in code, see if we've met the quiet period. If we have, I'll build the whole app, I'll deploy it to my local environment, and then I'll run all my tests. And if my tests fail, then I'll start sending out emails, right? And then take care of business, right? Start calling people up. So then the other thing I do is I also do build periodically. So even if nobody's checked in code, like I go ahead and build every morning at 3 a.m. Because then it's like, even if it is broke, it's going to tell me again when I get in first thing in the office. Email on the top of the queue says you need to go talk to these people and figure out what's going on, right? So one thing I do want to talk about that is, with what's very critical is that 95% of the time you're getting green bars in your test, right? That is something, before you automate this, you can't have like 100 emails of failures a day, because then nobody reads them, so that's like the first thing you got to kind of enforce before you do this, is get the green bars, run all this without the email turned on, and then once it's stable for a week or two, then you tell everybody we're turning it on, and if it does fail, it is an absolute fire drill to get the, it's a 3-alarm fire to get that taken care of. And then you can continue to use it. Otherwise, you have problems. So what we also do is, if we have known bugs, we put those into separate files and don't put them as part of the automation. So here is the actual TestSwarm plugin. So there's a page called Add Job PHP inside of TestSwarm, and this is basically exactly what that page is. So where is my TestSwarm server? What's the username and password? How many times do I want it to run? So what that is what if the browser is not so good? What if it's slow, it fails on that browser? It's actually going to try to run on that particular version of the browser 3 different browsers. Yours, mine, and his. It's not going to run on 100 of them, it's going to run on 3 of them. So I think 3 is enough. And then I created, this is supposed to be popular browsers, but I changed to E-Trade supported browsers. All browsers, there's some sort of numbers here. Do you want just upcoming browsers? What do you want? Yahoo has some, these are the ones they think you should test. So what I did is I went into the database and I said, these are our customer supported browsers. And I went in and added those to where if I do E-Trade supported browsers, it's just browsers that we think our customers care about. But actually what it is, for me, it's just browsers that I can get my hands on. So then what I can do is add and delete test, right? So here I'll delete all these. And, whoops. So I'll add a build step for TestSwarm integration. I can put that in, type in, add my next test, add my next test. I can delete that one, I didn't like it. And then I can tell it when it's done, I want to email. Who do I want to email? Do I only want to email individuals who broke the build? It is an absolutely amazing tool to integrate with something like qUnit. So highly recommend it. And you know, when I started working with this and started doing presentation to the CTO, CIO at E-Trade about this to get, you know, continued support for this and to force developers to do this outside of architecture, the number one thing my boss said to me was, like, make sure that this continues to be a useful tool for your team. Like, this is not for QA. Let QA do what QA does. Let them monkey test. Let them Selenium. Let them beat their head against the wall. Make sure you don't lose grasp of this. And so it's something that we run within our team. We hand off to QA, and we tell QA, like, this is a black box. It'll give you green bars. Don't worry what it does. But you can use it to run before you even waste any of your resources. So they actually call our stuff, run our test. If it gives green bars, then they'll accept as pushing forward. Anybody who develops a widget needs to develop a qUnit test to go along with it. And anytime a bug is filed and we're working within a kind of a release, you know, they look at the qUnit numbers and see that they go up before they'll accept it. So the other thing that I actually didn't mention is that TestSwarm is not limited to qUnit. It supports the MooTools test framework. It does support Selenium. It supports JSUnit. But I don't have experience with those, so I'm not going to stand up here and bullshit and tell you how great it works. I'll leave that as a homework assignment to those of you who, you know, who need to wish to use those tools. But I think, you know, definitely it's worth investigating, looking at, and trying it out, right? Selenium versus TestSwarm, right? So TestSwarm, client configuration, none, right? You just go to the URL. Whatever URL that's available in the network, don't do the wrong URL like me. Browser support, anything. Mobile, right? So I got my Nexus 1 here, my Android on, and was able to run, you know, our next E-Trade, all the tests that we have, you know, thousands of assertions on this. And I actually found interesting that we actually got a higher pass rate on this than we did on Chrome. So I don't know. That's very strange, right? I don't know. So open source, yeah. JavaScript support, so kind of full support. You can call functions, you can do whatever, you know, you have full access to JavaScript. And adoption, you know, I'm standing here, right? I mean, there's like virtually none. But what's real cool is on the testswarm.com, Dojo, MooTools, Prototype, like a bunch of these people are using testswarm.com to test their stuff. Yeah. So John Resig did some sort of to kind of promote it, to promote people to help. You can go to testswarm.com and use your work like resources to help test jQuery. Donate your browser, right? So he ran a little competition, gave away some free books and some free hosting or something. I don't know, maybe around Christmas time. So that was when I first saw him present on TestSwarm at Yahoo. And I said, wow, like how quick until I can get this running. So that's what I did. So, and then Selenium, right? Client configuration. It's all this nonsense server thing. A server's got to launch a browser. Usually your servers are like Linux. So then how do you, I don't know. It seems like a disaster to me. Supported browsers is just a handful. Good luck getting like Android. Like, no, you'll monkey test that. And open source, yes it is. And I'm not a Selenium expert. It may be a better tool than what I think it is, but not for me. So adoption, much. It is huge, right? Selenium, you know, I've been seeing Selenium presentations for ages. Very good. So thank you. Questions, comments? Anyone? Yeah. Thank you. So.